Good morning and welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. This morning we've been talking a lot about different risks, about taxes, about planning in general, how to get more tax efficient. So many of these things to understand on the taxes, the new tax law. I'm going to click through a couple of quick ones for you. State and local taxes deduction. You know, state and local taxes, otherwise known as SALT. Originally there was no cap on how much you could deduct in these. Now, you know, depending on where you're at, what those caps are and what the effect may be. Mortgage interest deductions, again, limitations put on that as well. That may, you know, probably, I got to say, for these two, when it comes to property taxes and mortgage interest deduction, most of my clients are not really impacted with those, okay? Medical expense deduction, now that one more so has come into play. And this is why finding, you know, again, because of the higher standard deduction, we don't really have the medical, you know, it's less likely that you're going to be able to itemize and get a higher deduction unless you've got some really substantial medical expenses that you're able to write off. And that all taxpayers may claim a deduction for unreimbursed medical expenses if they exceed 10% of adjusted gross income, which is up from the 7.5% that you had in 2017 and 18. So again, just making it all the more difficult to deduct to itemize when it comes to deductions. Alimony and child support, again, we don't deal with that one much. We know that alimony is going to be changing. I'm not going to deal with that or talk much about that this morning, or it has changed actually, effective going forward, not in arrears. So if you've already had to go through that, you know, this isn't going to affect you. But for people that are getting divorced going forward, that's going to be a pretty substantial problem. I think I talked about that one most recently with Dr. Friday as well. So again, not going to get into that. The estate tax is the other. Again, you're looking at increase from 11 million for individuals, 22 million for couples, and taxes over that threshold are 40%. Understanding that this is one that's always, you know, it affects fewer and fewer people today with the new increases, which is supposed to be cut in half, by the way, in about 5 years in 2025 when the sunset provisions within the tax law change or go into effect. Those, again, not one that we deal with a lot as far as for most folks, right? But there are strategies, again, to help you even minimize taxes there. All right, next comes, this is the big one. This is the one we want to talk about a little bit more, capital gains taxes. Capital gains can be a real benefit to you when it comes to your retirement planning, when it comes to income planning, understanding how capital gains taxes work. The difference between, for instance, long-term capital gains tax rates, they remain the same, right? And this is the part, look at that, 0. That means if you're in a 10 or 12% bracket, and what did I talk about earlier? That means up, you know, for a couple age 65, that's up to about approximately $105,000 in income. And you would, if you had capital gains on investments, on real estate, or whatever it might be, and those gains were, when combined with your other income, kept you under that $105,000 limit, then you would pay 0 tax. So let's say you're thinking of selling off some investments, or you've got, you know, and this may come into how you arrange your affairs with real estate sales as well. But we'll stick with the investment piece. If you're selling some stocks or stocks or stock mutual funds, and you've got capital gains there, maybe we look at, you know, and let's say those gains are $100,000 to use an example. And let's say maybe you've got $75,000 is your ordinary AGI, adjusted gross income, for taxes. Now we in that situation we're saying, well, okay, we can go up to $25,000, right, give or take, $25,000-$30,000, and we could have in capital gains and pay 0 tax. So if I was going to sell things that I had $100,000 gain and it would cause me to pay 15% tax, that's $15,000. If I instead spread that out over 3 or 4 years, depending on your numbers, right? Now I've got 0 tax. I just saved $15,000 in tax by how I go about taking those gains. So that's one example. As you can see, if you're above the 10 or 12% brackets, you're going to have a 15% tax rate on capital gains, long-term capital gains. And if you're in the top tax bracket, that's going to be 20%. So the income thresholds, of course, again, are increasing. understanding, minimizing taxable gain by choosing to sell your investments with the highest cost base. There's different ways that we can use strategies that can reduce and maybe even eliminate taxes for you in retirement when it comes to your investments and understanding how those work. Roth IRAs, this is another area we get into. And by the way, on this capital gains, not to, understanding how this can also be used for income. Let's say you're in a situation, okay, where your income in retirement, you've got a choice, and let's say pre-age 70 and a half, you're able to take money out of your retirement accounts to your 401ks, IRAs, whatever it might be, to supplement your income when we know it's going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. But let's say you've got these gains. Well, what we may do, even though you need that income, we can say, well, let's take the IRA off the table for the moment. Let's not take distributions from it, and instead, let's sell off some of these things that have these capital gains piled up in them, right, that have increased by this amount. Let's sell off some of that. And in the process of doing that, we're going to get this income that we need to maintain our standard of living, but we're not going to pay any tax on it, right? Now, we're going to balance those things out as we're going to look at the investment, what the risks are. We're going to look at the, how much would we take from this amount, and how much might we take from the retirement accounts. The goal of it being that we want to minimize taxes in the process, and with a little thought and planning and employment of certain strategies, we can do that. And this is one great one for doing that, is using capital gains as a way to take income in retirement, but potentially tax-free income in retirement. So again, understanding that, if you want, again, I've thrown up the offer. I'm not going to put it up right now. I'm just going to say, call my office, 615-376-5325. If you'd like some help with these kind of things, we can help you. All right? All right, Roth IRAs is the next one we want to go to. So on the Roth IRAs, this is another great strategy. The more you can diversify your accounts. So when we're talking about having money in IRAs, in your 401k, your TSP, as we've talked about, 403b, whatever your retirement account savings are. Maybe you have a SEP IRA or a simple IRA. All of these apply, and maybe you have Roth versions of these already. Well, if you can create those, or if we do Roth conversions sometimes, all right, this can give you even more flexibility when it comes to minimizing taxes in retirement. And depending on your situation is what those look like. Now this slide is just talking about if you're contributing to IRAs, if you're still working, based on your income. To contribute, of course, you're going to need to, with Roth IRAs, those income limits, but also of course, you have to have income to be able to put money into a Roth. If you're already retired and don't have income, wages, active earned income, in other words, it's not passive income from rental properties or other things don't count. Then you can contribute to a Roth. Again, the limits on how much you can contribute is the other part of that, and that's where $6,000 or $7,000, depending on your age, that you can put in. Contributing now to a 401k or that, all the same limits there, where you can put up to maybe 25% of your income, and depending, it's 25,000 potentially, 18 to 25,000 on your 401ks, and up to 55,000 into SEPs. These are ways you can really pump up some Roth accounts depending on your income and other factors. And we talk about sometimes you're better off, right, if you're in a higher tax bracket, to take the traditional route, save those taxes, especially if your income is going to be lower in retirement, and that's where we might revisit the Roth through Roth conversions. And we're going to talk about that when we come back. But first, we're going to take a break. Join us here, but we'll be right back on the Retirement Report.